They said the American era was over. China had sworn they would bury the pride of the United States in the water, that their swimmers were engineered for dominance, that the empire of medals would shift east. The cameras were ready to capture the funeral of American swimming. But what happened in the next 50 seconds didn't just defy expectations. It rewrote the laws of what the human body could endure under pressure. Beijing, 2008. The water cube glowed like a sapphire under the eyes of the world. This wasn't just another Olympic final. This was a declaration of war wrapped in chlorine and ambition. China had invested billions into their aquatic program, scouting talent from rural provinces, building training facilities that looked more like laboratories than pools. Their swimmers weren't just athletes. They were products of a system designed to crush the West. And Michael Phelps, the kid from Baltimore with the hyperextended joints and the lung capacity of a small whale, was standing on enemy soil, staring down the barrel of humiliation. The Chinese crowd roared with a hunger that shook the glass walls. This was their moment, their pool, their gold, the 200-meter butterfly. Phelps had already claimed golds, but this race carried a different weight. It wasn't about adding another medal to the collection. It was about answering a question that echoed through every sports bar in America and every state-run news channel in Beijing. Could one man hold back an entire nation's will? The lane assignments were drawn. Phelps in lane 5. To his left and right, swimmers who had been training with one singular obsession: to take him down. Wu Peng, China's golden boy, had been drilling this race in his sleep. The Serbian Milorad Čavić, long-limbed and technically flawless, had publicly stated that Phelps was beatable, that the myth was fragile. The Japanese contingent was silent but lethal, their strokes measured to the millisecond. And then there were the Hungarians, the Australians, each carrying the weight of a federation that believed this was the moment the legend would crack. The horn sounded. 8 bodies hit the water like missiles. Phelps surged forward, his trademark dolphin kick propelling him ahead in the opening meters. But something was wrong. By the 50-meter mark, he wasn't dominating. Čavić was matching him stroke for stroke. Wu Peng was breathing down his neck, his technique sharp and unforgiving. The Chinese section of the stadium erupted. This was it. The upset they had prayed for. Phelps touched the wall at the turn, but the margin was razor-thin. Coaches were screaming. Timers were leaning forward. The energy in the building had shifted from anticipation to chaos. Then the crisis arrived, not from the outside, but from within. At the 150-meter mark, Phelps felt his goggles fill with water. A catastrophic malfunction. His vision blurred into a wash of blue and white. He couldn't see the lane lines, couldn't see the wall, couldn't gauge his position. In a sport where victory is measured in hundredths of a second, this was a death sentence. Čavić pulled ahead. The Serbian's arms were slicing through the water with surgical precision. Wu Peng was closing in from the other side, his strokes synchronized like a metronome. Phelps was swimming blind, his rhythm fractured, his breathing labored. The commentators were already preparing the narrative of the fall. The American dream, drowned in Chinese water. But what the world didn't know, what the cameras couldn't capture, was the thousands of hours Phelps had spent preparing for exactly this nightmare. His coach, Bob Bowman, had a philosophy that bordered on sadistic genius. He believed that champions weren't built in perfect conditions. They were forged in chaos. So Bowman had made Phelps train in darkness. Literally. He would turn off the lights in the pool and force Phelps to swim lap after lap, counting his strokes, memorizing the feel of the water against his skin, learning to navigate by instinct when sight failed. Phelps had swum thousands of meters blind, training his body to become a compass, his muscle memory a map. This wasn't luck. This was prophecy fulfilled. With 25 meters to go, Phelps made a decision that defied logic. Instead of taking the standard 3 strokes to the wall, he took one less. A half-stroke gamble that could either deliver gold or confirm his defeat. His arms extended in a motion that seemed to stretch time itself. His fingertips reached forward with a desperation that was also calculation. Kavik, confident in his lead, took the standard approach, gliding slightly into the wall. That glide, that microsecond of hesitation, was all Phelps needed. His hand crashed into the touchpad with a violence that sent shockwaves through the electronic timing system. The scoreboard froze. The crowd held its breath. Then the result flashed. Phelps, 1:52:03. Kavik, 1:52:04. 1/100th of a second. The margin between immortality and obscurity. The Chinese section of the crowd went silent. The Serbian coach threw his hands in the air, demanding a review. But the cameras told the truth. Phelps had executed a finish so precise, so technically impossible, that it would be studied in biomechanics labs for years. His lactic acid levels were off the charts, his heart rate pushing 200 beats per minute, yet his final stroke was as clean as his first. This wasn't human. This was something else. The American flag rose on the center pole, and the opening notes of the national anthem filled the water cube. Phelps stood on the highest step of the podium, flanked by swimmers who had given everything and still come up short. He smiled, not with arrogance, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had seen the future and bent it to his will. You know, if you're someone who's followed Phelps from Athens to Beijing, from the young prodigy to the warrior he became, you already understand what this moment meant. It wasn't just a race, it was a statement. So if you want to keep reliving these stories, these moments where the impossible became routine, hit that subscribe button. Because there are more battles, more golds, more miracles still to uncover. What happened in those 50 seconds wasn't just about swimming faster than everyone else. It was about swimming smarter, deeper, with a level of preparation that bordered on the obsessive. Phelps didn't just train his body. He trained his mind to operate in the absence of certainty, to execute perfection when the world was crumbling around him. The goggles filling with water wasn't a freak accident. It was a test, and he had already passed it 1,000 times in training, in the dark, when no one was watching. That's the difference between talent and mastery. Talent shows up when conditions are favorable. Mastery shows up when everything is falling apart. The Chinese Federation released a statement later that week, acknowledging Phelps's victory, but noting that their program was still in development, that the future belonged to them. But in that moment, on that podium, with the stars and stripes waving above him, Phelps had done more than win a gold medal. He had answered a geopolitical challenge with athletic dominance. He had forced an entire nation to watch as he took what they believed was theirs. The smile on his face wasn't just joy. It was proof. Proof that preparation beats prediction. That discipline beats declarations. That one man, armed with nothing but obsession and a refusal to accept limits, could stand against the machinery of a superpower and emerge victorious. The race became legendary not because of the time, but because of the context. Phelps had swum blind and still found the wall first. He had faced the best swimmers from multiple continents, each one carrying the hopes of their nation, and he had crushed them with a finish so narrow it seemed ordained by fate. But it wasn't fate. It was Bowman's brutal training regimen. It was the 10,000 hours in the pool when his peers were resting. It was the decision to take one less stroke when every instinct screamed to play it safe. That's what separates legends from champions. Champions win when they're supposed to. Legends win when they're not. The aftermath of that race sent shockwaves through international swimming. Coaches began incorporating blind training into their programs, trying to replicate what Bowman had built. But replication isn't innovation. You can copy the methods, but you can't copy the mentality. Phelps didn't train in the dark because someone told him to. He did it because he wanted to be ready for a scenario that might never happen. And when it did happen, When his goggles betrayed him at the worst possible moment, he didn't panic. He executed. That level of mental fortitude isn't taught. It's earned, stroke by stroke, in the silence of a pool at midnight when no one is watching, no one is cheering, and the only voice you hear is your own, demanding more. The image of Phelps on that podium, holding the American flag, smiling at a crowd that had come to witness his downfall, became iconic. It was plastered on magazine covers, turned into motivational posters, dissected in sports psychology seminars. But the real story wasn't in the photograph. It was in the years that led up to it. The mornings he woke up sore and swam anyway. The races he lost and used as fuel. The critics who said he was overhyped, overrated, overexposed. He let them talk, and then he let his performance do the answering. That's the essence of greatness. Not silencing your critics with words, but with results so undeniable that even your enemies have to acknowledge them. What made that 50-second stretch of water so devastating for his competitors wasn't just that they lost. It was that they lost to a man who was operating on a different plane of existence. Kavic's stroke was technically superior in some aspects. Wu Peng's conditioning was world-class. But Phelps had something they didn't. He had stared into the void of failure, had trained for disaster, and had emerged with a toolkit that could handle anything the sport threw at him. When your preparation is deeper than your competition's imagination, you don't just win, you dominate. The moment the anthem played, it wasn't just about America versus China. It was about the philosophy that hard work, when taken to its extreme, becomes a superpower. Phelps wasn't born unbeatable. He was made unbeatable, one punishing workout at a time, one impossible standard at a time. And when the world watched him stand on that podium, they weren't just watching an athlete celebrate. They were watching the culmination of a process so rigorous, so uncompromising, that it turned a kid with big ears and long arms into the most decorated Olympian in history. If that finish gave you chills, if watching Phelps defy the odds one more time reminded you why you fell in love with this sport, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Because the journey doesn't end here. There are more races, more comebacks, more moments where Phelps proved that the limits we accept are just illusions we haven't shattered yet. The legacy of that race extends beyond the medal count. It became a case study in peak performance under pressure. Sports scientists analyzed his stroke rate, his breathing pattern, the biomechanics of that final lunge. What they found was astonishing. Phelps' heart rate variability during the race showed an ability to remain calm even as his body was in full crisis mode. His lactate threshold was higher than medically expected. His proprioception, the body's ability to sense its position in space, was off the charts. These weren't just genetic gifts. They were adaptations earned through a training regimen that most athletes would consider torture. Bowman had pushed him past the breaking point so many times that Phelps's breaking point had moved. It wasn't fixed. It was flexible. And in Beijing, against the best swimmers on the planet, that flexibility became the difference between victory and defeat. The Chinese swimmers who faced him that day went on to have successful careers, but they never forgot the lesson Phelps taught them in those 50 seconds. That preparation isn't just about being ready for what you expect. It's about being ready for what you can't predict. Wu Peng later said in an interview that racing Phelps felt like racing a ghost. You could see him, but you couldn't catch him. And when you thought you had him, he would shift into another gear that didn't seem humanly possible. That's the mythology Phelps built, not through trash talk or theatrics, but through relentless, undeniable excellence. Standing on that podium, Phelps knew something the crowd didn't. This wasn't the peak. This was just another step. He would go on to win more golds in Beijing, would retire, would come back, would prove doubters wrong again and again. But in that moment, with the anthem echoing and the flag rising, he had accomplished something deeper than adding to his medal count. He had proven that one individual, armed with obsession and preparation, could stand against collective will, and emerge victorious. That the narrative could be flipped. That the favorites could be shocked. That legends aren't born. They're built in the dark, stroke by stroke, until the moment arrives and they execute with a precision that leaves the world breathless.